Ja, herzlich willkommen zu einer neuen Ausgabe SC Talk und es ist eigentlich heute ein Startinterview, aber ich habe einen Conflict of Interest. Ich bin Aktionär. Und zwar es geht um Sernova Corp und ich habe heute den Präsidenten und CEO da. Ja, Conflict of Interest sagt glaube ich schon alles. Die Aktie ist heuer abgegangen wie wirklich, wie Schmitz Katze, wie es so schön heißt. Schauen wir mal, wie der Chart ist. Jetzt sehen Sie mich zwar nicht mehr, aber das ist egal. Sie sehen, der Aktienkurs ist von 20 Cent auf über 2,90 hochgeschossen und seitdem konsolidieren wir, auch wenn wir auf einem sehr hohen Niveau konsolidieren, irgendwo bei 1,20 ist da unten ein schöner Boden, wir sind dort wieder jetzt angekommen, aber es ist jetzt auch natürlich eine interessante Zeit. Warum, ob es jetzt wieder interessant ist, ob wir jetzt wieder zurück rein müssen oder unsere Position aufstocken müssen. Philip, thank you for your time. And I say it in my German introduction. First, I have a conflict of interest. I'm a shareholder. This is our first discussion what we have about your company, and I'm investor in your company when the share price was really on the lower end. I think at 30 cents or something, and then we have a pretty good run in January. Maybe before we start and you talk a little bit about your company, maybe you can also explain why a share price is exploding in January.
Right, that sounds good. And thank you very much for the introduction. A couple of things. First of all, I just want to mention that Sernova has been around for 12 years. We've been developing this regenerative medicine technology for quite some time. We're one of the first companies in the world to be able to do work on the technologies that we're working on, and we've gotten some significant advances. We're a public company. We are trading on the Toronto Venture Exchange, on the OTCQB in the US, and on its under the symbol PSH on the Frankfurt market. Now, with respect, and I'll talk about our technologies, but just to answer your question, we have a phase 2, which is an efficacy clinical trial ongoing at the University of Chicago, and it's a first in world trial where we are assessing therapeutic cells that are placed into our implantable device for type 1 diabetic patients. And so if you think about it, we are treating patients that have lost the ability to control their blood sugar levels, and that is because certain living cells in their pancreas have died. And what Sernova is doing is working on replacing those cells, and we're placing those into a medical device that is placed deep under the skin. And we're working with patients that have been taking insulin injections for many, 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 many years. And these insulin injections still result in the diabetes side effects. So back in January, our clinical study has been ongoing for some time. And back in January, our clinical physician and surgeon presented some data at a conference that was quite encouraging and quite positive with respect to our ongoing clinical study. And Sernova is basically, we believe that we're the first company in the world in this field to be able to show that living cells that are called islets can survive within our device that is placed deep under the skin. And this device is about the size of a business card, so it's quite small. And we've also shown that those cells become highly vascularized. In other words, blood vessels will grow into those cells, and then they can read blood sugar levels, just like the pancreas would, and they are able to release insulin in the bloodstream. So insulin that is produced by cells is measured by a biomarker called C-peptide. And so we have been able to see C-peptide in a number of the patients that are treated, and we have been able to show clinical benefit of that insulin in the bloodstream. So these patients have had improvement in some of the features of type 1 diabetes that they have to deal with on a daily basis that are really beneficial. And in addition, we have shown that the patients in this trial so far have been able to reduce the amount of insulin injections that they're taking on a daily basis. So this is a very, very significant advancement in the field.
Is it, sorry to interrupt you, is it possible in the future that he don't need any insulin in the future, maybe, so that, okay.
So our goal is for our company, for all of the therapeutic applications, is to find what we call a functional cure for the different diseases that we're working on. So the goal for treatment of type 1 diabetes is actually to eliminate the need for taking insulin injections anymore. Currently, we have one patient that is advancing in the study that has become insulin independent with the cell pouch and with an other small top-up of cells, and that patient has become insulin independent. So we would consider that a functional cure. And our physician, as they're moving through the study, is working on optimizing, the number of cells and that sort of thing to be able to, get to that point where the patients can become insulin independent.
But this means that, so if I understand you right, diabetes is one of this component, but your technology, you can use this for other diseases too.
Yes. So we had a grant with a number of academic investigators in Europe, in Germany in particular, in Italy and the UK, under the Horizon 2020 program, where we were working on developing a cell therapy approach for treatment of hemophilia A. So you can ask, what is hemophilia A? It's a bleeding disorder where patients are missing a factor called factor VIII, right? So that's a specific protein. So what we were able to do in this, under this grant, was take a sample of blood from the patients that have hemophilia A. We were able to isolate a certain cell type in the blood, and then we were able to insert the gene for factor VIII into those cells and place those into the cell pouch. And then we were able to have the cell pouch release factor VIII into the bloodstream. And we were able to show that we could improve the function of clotting in preclinical models. This is something that is in preclinical setting right now, that we can then move this towards clinical trials. So this is an example of what we call ex vivo gene therapy. So in other words, we're putting a gene into the cells that is missing, essentially, to be able to treat diseases. And so hemophilia A is a $10 billion a year market. And this is an example of a rare disease that we're able to treat with our cell therapy type applications within our device.
Mm-hmm. You said 10 million or 10 billion?
10 billion. It's a $10 billion
10 billion.
Year.
Oh, okay. Small difference between million and billion.
Yeah. So we have actually another clinical application that we're moving forward with, and this is for patients that have thyroid disease. So if you think about the thyroid gland, it's not talked about very much, but a lot of people have thyroid problems. And the thyroid gland controls how your body uses energy, and it controls how much energy your body actually has to function. So we have been working with a surgeon who has been removing the thyroid gland from patients for various reasons. And if you think about that, if you lose your thyroid gland, then, and you don't take medications, you can actually die. And so what we were looking at is when the thyroid gland is removed, there's about 150,000 patients in North America alone every year that have their thyroid gland removed. They're put on medications every day for the rest of their lives. So it's very similar to the diabetes type application. And what we were able to do is work with the surgeon to be able to take human thyroid tissue from the patient that was having their thyroid gland removed, find the healthy portion of it, place that into cell pouch in preclinical models, and we were able to not only show long-term survival of that tissue in the cell pouch under the skin, but we also showed evidence of what we call precursor thyroid hormones in the bloodstream. So again, you can think of it almost like a theme in variations, where we can take therapeutic cells that are missing from the patient, put it into the cell pouch, have that connect up to the blood supply and then have that factor be released into the bloodstream. So you can see we can treat multiple diseases. Mm-hmm. So this is a program that we're going to be moving into the clinic as quickly as we can. And it represents another multi-billion-dollar application.
Okay. Brings me to two questions. We speak of this pouch. What this is? What is this pouch? Is it, how this looks like? And the second is, you say you take blood, for example, from one patient, and or you take something from the individual, some cells from the individual, and make a personal cure for them. Is it right? So do you have not, okay, we talk here about this and that, so we have you take something from out of my body if I have a problem and put it in this pouch, and this pouch makes then the same function what my problems are overseas, or cure my problems with them.
Yeah, so it really depends on the different disease that we're treating. So for thyroid disease, our first clinical application will be from patients that are having their thyroid gland removed. Mm-hmm. And we're able to select the healthy tissue that is in the thyroid gland. And then we'll take that tissue and then place it back into the device. So here we're working with the patient's own cells. Mm-hmm. And if you think about what the device is basically about the size of a business card, and this is scalable, and it has a number of chambers in it. And the device is very porous. And the reason it's very porous is because it acts almost like an organ-like environment where it allows vascularized tissue to grow through the pores of the device into these little chambers. And within the chamber, we have a plug that is a space holding plug. And after about 3 weeks, we can pull the plug out of the chambers, and then we have a beautiful, highly vascularized tissue space into which we can put the therapeutic cells. And then the tissue matrix will then grow around those therapeutic cells. So we form an organ-like environment, is how it works in the device chambers, which is why, and by forming that highly vascularized organ-like environment, we believe that that's how we're able to keep those cells alive and get those into the bloodstream. And the device is made up of permanent polymer materials so that the device doesn't degrade over time. And it's made of materials that are already approved by regulatory authorities for permanent use in the body. So we made it relatively simple. We've shown that it's highly safe in patients and consistently and biocompatible, which means that it doesn't cause any inflammatory reactions. And what's unique about our device is that it is able to form an organ-like environment for the placement of therapeutic cells. And so this is the uniqueness around our device itself.
Mm-hmm. Wow, sounds really unbelievable.
Yeah. So many. If you think about most medical devices that are placed in the body typically will try to form a collagen network around that device to wall it off in the same way that occurs when you have a splinter. Mm-hmm. So think about a splinter, you'll feel this thick material around it, and that's collagen. It's the body trying to reject it. So we had to develop a device that the body would accept. And by making it porous, then it allows and encourages tissue to grow mm-hmm. into the device as opposed to walling it off. Mm-hmm. So we believe we're the first company in the world to be able to get highly vascularized tissue environment for therapeutic cells for the regenerative medicine space, which wow. gives us a huge opportunity.
Wow. Sounds great. So, but what are now the plans? So what's going forward? So what are the next steps?
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about the clinical study. And what's happening is as this study is evolving, then we're learning a lot more about how the cell pouch is working and how it's able to treat type 1 diabetes. So if you talk about type 1 diabetes and you think about it, if I can just refresh everyone's memory, and I think everybody knows someone that has type 1 diabetes. What's happened with these patients is that the cells in their pancreas that control blood sugar levels, in other words, read blood sugar level and they release insulin into the bloodstream, have died. And so these patients are having to take insulin injections multiple times a day, every day for the rest of their lives. And one of the other issues is that there is a subgroup of patients that has something called hypoglycemia unawareness. And these are patients that can take an insulin injection and their blood sugar levels can go so low that they will go into a coma and die. And they can do this without even realizing, they don't get shakes or tremors. So this is the population that we are treating first, because only a cell therapy approach can help these people. So the patients that we're bringing into the study have to show that they're unable to produce insulin in their blood, so that when we show with our device and therapeutic cells that they're producing insulin, we know it's from the cell pouch technology. So what we do in this clinical trial is that we first implant the device into the patients. And then what we're able to do is we provide them medications to protect the cells from the immune system attack. And then we will put them on the transplant list, and then they get actual new islets placed into the device. And then we follow them for approximately 6 months. And then we put another dose of cells in there, because we're looking at the effect of dosing of the cells, so we can learn about how many cells. And throughout that period of time, we're measuring efficacy measures. So we measure things such as hemoglobin A1C, which is a long-term measure of how blood sugar levels are doing in the blood. We're also measuring the number of what we call hypoglycemic unaware events to see if they're decreasing. So this hypoglycemic unaware event is shown as your sugar level drops to a very, very low level. So, and what we're finding, and we have 20 additional endpoints that we're looking at. And what's really important about this study is it does not have a typical binary endpoint that a lot of clinical studies have. The second thing that's important is we have been able to have our surgeon and professor present at various conferences and can release some information about how the patients are doing as the study is progressing. So he's been able to do this, and we've shown quite positive results. So in our first patients, we've been able to show elimination of these hypoglycemia unaware events, which is actually a lifesaver for the patient. And we've shown an improvement of hemoglobin A1C. So that means your long-term side effects have the ability to be able to decrease. And then we've also shown a reduction in the need for taking insulin injections. So these are really important advancements. In the study, in terms of where we're going here, we're working on completing enrollment of the study very, very soon, so that we have all of the patients in the study with cell pouches and with therapeutic cells, and advancing that study to completion. So the other things that we're working on the diabetes side is that, if you think about it, the next step is really to look for an unlimited supply of cells, because we want to treat millions of patients as we're going forward. So by using the donor cells that we're working with, this is very positive, because we're testing the real thing in your body to see how it works in the cell pouch. But Sernova has a worldwide exclusive license to a stem cell derived technology that we can run these cells through to be able to produce as many islets as we want. So these are cells that read blood sugar levels and release insulin. So we're moving this technology forward to the clinic. And at the same time, we are working with a number of pharmaceutical companies who have realized that their insulin franchise is going to disappear, and the next wave of therapeutics for type 1 diabetes is a cell therapy approach. So what they have been doing also is working on developing these stem cell derived technologies similar to what Sernova is doing. And Sernova is in collaborations with a number of companies to be able to look at the idea of combining our cell pouch with their stem cell derived technologies in diabetes studies to see if it works well, and if we can then move to a licensing deal with these companies, which would amount to an upfront payment, royalties, and milestones, and then co-development of these products into clinic and to be able to treat millions of patients. So Sernova has, in the diabetes area, we have multiple approaches to how we're working on treating these patients and getting to that million patient population.
Let's bring me to some more questions. So when you talk with other companies for a license agreement, do you talk with these major companies that everybody knows, or you talk with to companies that are well known in your area where you work, but maybe not Joe Smith or whatever in the average not known?
So if you think of, that's a great question. If you think about the major pharmaceutical companies in the world, there aren't that many of them. And if you think about the ones that are producing insulin right now, we have relationships with many of those, a number of those different companies. Okay. And because the interesting thing about a pharmaceutical company is that they may be very familiar with the cell therapy approach, but they typically do not have the infrastructure to be able to work on devices, on medical devices, right? So Sernova is really at the interface between the therapeutic cells and the medical devices, and being able to combine those together. Mm-hmm. And so by Sernova working with these pharmaceutical companies, and we're able to provide the medical device side, and also, the other immunology type sides that are important to make those collaborations work.
Mm-hmm. The second question will come into my mind. I see clear the benefit for all the patients, for sure. That's clear. But to looking realistic on the time frame, we are now. You say you are now in phase 2. Normally, after phase 2 comes phase 3. And then maybe comes this the process, the FDA process to bring the product to the market. On the realistic time frame, from which time frame we talk here?
Right. So we have, the way we work things is that we have a product schedule where that would be coming out, whereby we start with working on treating the sickest diabetic patients. And these, the sickest diabetic patients are the brittle diabetic patients, and that's considered to be an orphan status indication, right? So it's a relatively smaller population, but a very significant one. And so by working with that population, then we believe that the number of patients required to be able to get approval for a product that is showing a significant benefit to these patients is much smaller. So the time horizon could be a much smaller number of years for that population. So we're looking at the potential of approval for, in approximately 3 years or even less, depending on how things go, and for our first product. And then as we expand our patient population with the stem cell derived technology, then you're looking at much bigger markets, and you're looking at bigger clinical studies. But what our goal is to try to start bringing revenue in from our first type of products that are coming in, and then that would support the development of the much bigger type of applications. And this is also the reason why we're working with pharmaceutical companies, because they would have the ability to fund some of these bigger trials for studies whereby we would be moving ahead with, when we get a product approval and treating millions of patients. The other thing I want to bring up is that the thyroid application becomes very important here, because we're going to be working on clinical trials that are using the patient's own tissue to put back into the device to recover the thyroid function. And this application, we believe, should be able to move faster through the regulatory hurdles. And this is something we have to talk with the clinical authority or with the regulatory authorities in the near future. But this is, again, another product that could be approved relatively early. When you think about the idea of 150,000 patients a year with this problem that we could treat with Sernova, even 10% or 20% of the market could result in $500 to $700 million in revenue for Sernova every year. So we're looking at the shorter term type applications to bring revenue in, and then looking at the longer term applications to bring in much more revenue from the bigger population. So this is the strategy that we
funds is a good word. What I talked before. Funds is always important by a biotech company or a pharmaceutical company. Research costs a lot of money. So how looks your final situation, cash situation? How much cash you have, and how long you can work with this cash?
Yeah. So for quite a number of years, Sernova had been working with small amounts of money, in the low millions of dollars, and working on and obtaining grants such as we did with the Horizon 2020 program. But with the success of our initial clinical data, we were able to do a bought deal in the first quarter of 2021, where we raised $23 million. And now currently we have over $32 million in the bank, which gives us a runway running all of our programs of approximately 2 years, if not more. And in addition, Sernova has had a number of warrants from other private placements that we've done, whereby and those warrants are getting exercised because they're significantly in the money now. And so that has been bringing money in addition to the bought deal.
And you can expand or the research with this high cash what you have now.
Yes. So we're able to expand the research. We're able to start additional clinical programs and to advance our diabetes program and make everything go. So Sernova is right now in the process of expanding its team, and so that we can move our programs much faster now with the increased funds that we have.
You're listed on the TSX, or your primary listing is TSX, but normally this kind of companies where you are is normally listed on NASDAQ. Are there any plans to go on NASDAQ? They are sitting the right investors, so that's the right funds to look at.
So with the funding that we've just done recently, we have a whole series of institutional funders that have come into the company who have seen the value of our technology. And our plan as we're moving forward is to move to a more sophisticated exchange, such as NASDAQ, as the company is advancing. And what we're looking at is, doing this with the right bankers at the right time, at the right valuation. So this is definitely where the company is going, to a NASDAQ listing. But we want to make sure that we do it, and we're working with bankers, et cetera, to move these processes forward. So, we could jump onto NASDAQ right now, but we want to make sure that the company is very, very solid, is working with the right people, and has the right valuation when we move forward. So we're trying to get a number of deals done that we believe in the short term will significantly increase the valuation of the company so that we can transition to NASDAQ much more easily.
Deals sounds great, and brings me maybe to last question. What we as a shareholder can expect from the company in the next 6 months, in the second half of the year. So do you think what are the major driver, what the shareholder should look for?
Yeah, so I think first thing is further advancements in our type 1 diabetes study as more data comes out. And, so far things are looking positive. So we're looking at longer term data in patients and additional patients data coming out. And then the second part is that we're going to be working on is really advancing our collaborations with our pharmaceutical companies. And we would very much like to advance discussions to get some kind of a licensing deal with one of the major pharmaceutical companies. We're also very interested in working with medical device companies. And because if you think about it, the medical device companies who are selling insulin pumps currently are planning on losing their insulin pump business as the cell therapy technologies approach. So we're also doing something very similar, looking at from the medical device perspective. So my near-term goal is to really work on getting some business deals completed, which I think will have a very significant impact on the company. And these press releases that will come out will be announceable as things are progressing. So that's the second thing we're working on. And then we're also advancing our thyroid program into clinical trials, and there'll be more updates on that. I believe that our thyroid program is really important because we're going to be the first company in the world to be able to treat thyroid disease, and the market is completely open for us right now. So we're looking at advancing that program. So stay tuned for more information on that side of things too.
Wow. Philip, thank you for your first introduction to your company. It was really a great one. I think it was really a great interview. Gives me really a great insight to your company, and I'm now a much more happier shareholder than before. Then now I understand the story a little bit better.
Thank you.
Thank you for das.
Great.
Ja, das war ein erstes Intro zu Sernova und ich muss ehrlicherweise sagen, er hat wirklich extrem gut performt. Also ich habe mir nicht zu viel erwartet, weil ich mir gedacht, okay, wissen Sie, solche Biotech-Firmen, die gibt es ja viele. Aber das, was er wirklich gesagt hat, hat wirklich Hand und Fuß. Also das Wichtigste ist, und warum es eigentlich diesen Move gegeben hat im Jänner, das war, sie haben eine Studie in Phase 2, dort geht es um Diabetes, und Sie wissen, oder jeder, der irgendeinen kennt, der Diabetes hat, der muss sich Insulin spritzen. Das heißt, eigentlich sind die Zellen, die Insulin produzieren, im Körper tot. Was haben die für eine Technologie? Sie haben quasi ein scheckkartengroßes Tool entwickelt, eine Tasche, sagen wir mal so, die im Körper implementiert wird, also wirklich operativ eingesetzt wird. Die ist allerdings so, dass der Körper es akzeptiert. Das sind auch Bausteine, die der Körper nicht aufnimmt, also akzeptiert und nicht gegen sie kämpft. Das ist also nicht so, wie wenn sie jetzt irgendwo sich eintreten, sage ich jetzt einmal, und dann kämpft der Körper gegen diesen Fremdkörper, den er dann abstoßen wird. So ist es nicht, sondern der Körper akzeptiert das, ist auch porös, der kann durchdrungen werden. Da wird auch quasi der Körper nimmt diesen Fremdkörper auf und akzeptiert das als eigenes Körperbestandteil. Und das ist eigentlich die Grundgedanke dahinter. Und in diese Tasche, und da können Sie mehrere installieren quasi, setzen Sie Zellen ein, die genauso Insulin produzieren. Das heißt, und das gibt es ja damit schon einen, der glaube ich seit 6 Monaten oder so ist, der braucht sich kein Insulin mehr spritzen, weil sein Körper über diese Zellen selber Insulin produziert und dadurch braucht er kein Insulin mehr spritzen. Aber er sagt, es geht nur nicht das, dass sie weniger Insulin spritzen müssen oder gar keins mehr, sondern es geht auch darum, dass es verschiedene Side-Effects gibt, die man mit dieser Therapie verhindern kann und dadurch auch teilweise lebensbedrohliche Situationen vermeiden kann. Also dass es nicht unterzuckert wird. Es gibt auch eine Unterzuckerung, die man gar nicht spürt, sondern auf einmal ist es einfach so weit und dann fällt man ins Koma und wenn man Pech hat, stirbt man sogar dran. Und das ist aber nicht nur für Diabetes, sondern es gibt es auch für alle möglichen anderen Anwendungen auch. Und dort sind sie quasi auch, teilweise ist es so, dass sie gesunde Bestandteile eines Organs oder gesunde Zellen, die sie entnehmen können, dort implantieren in diese Taschen und die dann sozusagen die Funktion des Organes übernehmen. Also eine unglaubliche Situation. Muss ich ehrlicherweise sagen, hat mich echt umgehauen. Sie haben lange Zeit, also das ist die Technologie, sie arbeiten an mehrere Sachen gleichzeitig und man sieht jetzt, die Company existiert schon relativ lang, wenn man sich den Chart langfristig anschaut, hat sie lang nichts getan oder sehr wenig getan. Es liegt allerdings auch maßgeblich daran, dass sie zu wenig Geld gehabt haben. Durch diesen Move, was sie gehabt haben im Jänner, durch diese sensationellen Daten, haben sie Geld auch bekommen. Sie haben 23 Millionen geraced, sie haben jetzt 32 Millionen in der Tasche, so viel haben die wahrscheinlich sonst vielleicht noch nie gehabt. Und jetzt können sie richtig Gas geben und beschleunigen nicht nur das Diabetes-Produkt, sondern eben auch andere Produkte auch. Und was auch natürlich jetzt da ist, dass die richtigen Leute auch an Bord gekommen sind, also die richtigen Investmentbanker, denn einen Kreditpunkt, was ich schon habe, ist, so eine Firma kehrt an die Nasdaq. Und er sagt, sie wollen alles richtig machen, sie haben die richtigen Leute schon an Bord geholt, durch das Placement auch teilweise, und sie warten jetzt einfach zu dem richtigen Zeitpunkt, wo es dann Zeit wird, an die Nasdaq zu gehen. Sie könnten auch jetzt schon gehen, wollen sie aber jetzt noch nicht, es ist noch nicht der richtige Zeitpunkt. So, ich habe dann wichtig gesagt, was sind die Newstreiber und wie schaut es denn dann mit den Großen aus? Denn die was jetzt Insulin produzieren, die verlieren ja mit diesem Business eher ein Geschäft. Ja, und da können wir, glaube ich, in den nächsten paar Monaten erwarten, dass da irgendwelche Lizenzdeals kommen. Ich habe auch gefragt, sprechen wir jetzt von den ganz großen Firmen oder sprechen wir die zwar wichtigen Firmen, die aber ich nicht kenne, weil ich mich nicht so tief in den Markt eingrabe. Und so wie ich ihn richtig verstanden habe, glaube ich, sprechen wir schon von diesen Big Bromern, die dort gesehen sind. Aber nicht nur die, und das war auch interessant zu sehen, das hat er in der letzten Frage auch beantwortet, sondern er spricht auch mit denen, die mit dem ganzen Insulin-Business profitieren. Zum Beispiel die Insulinpumpenhersteller, die verlieren ja auch mit der Zelltherapie ihr Business. Und die sind auch zukünftige Partner oder potenzielle Partner, auch mit denen wird gesprochen. Ich habe dann auch geredet, wie ist denn der Zeithorizont, wann können wir denn wirklich mit den ersten Produkten reden? Und da hat er gemeint, sie konzentrieren sich auf einen kleinen Bereich derzeit, bevor sie in die Masse gehen, und dieser Bereich ist viel einfacher auch eine Genehmigung zu bekommen, und das könnte durchaus innerhalb der nächsten 3 Jahre oder weniger schon so weit sein, und das ist auch noch immer ein Multimillionen-Dollar-Markt, wo sie richtig gute Lizenzen oder richtig gutes Geld damit verdienen. Also das heißt, jetzt tun sie relativ viele potenzielle News-Treiber, die den Aktienkurs nach vorne treiben können, auf. Erstens einmal eben Lizenzpartner, zweitens einmal natürlich Ergebnisse aus der Studie, aus der klinischen Studie, dann Kooperationen, klar, vielleicht auch die Nasdaq früher oder später. Also es gibt sehr, sehr viele potenzielle Treiber, und was auch wichtig ist, wenn man von Lizenzagreement spricht, und das kennen wir von anderen Biotech-Unternehmen, dann gibt es so Upfront-Payment, Milestone-Payments, und da reden wir teilweise schon von Summen, die sich gesalzen haben. Also da reden wir von satten zweistelligen Summen, die da teilweise dann gesprochen wird, was da bezahlt wird. Also extrem spannend. Ich habe mir es nicht gedacht, dass die Company so super ist und so Ding ist. Also ich muss ehrlicherweise sagen, war extrem positiv überrascht und bin froh, dass ich Aktionär bin. Und ja, das war es eigentlich von Sernova am 1. Juni 2021. Ja, viel Spaß noch. Tschüss und Baba. Philipp, thank you for your introduction. It was really a great one. I like this interview, and hopefully we have time to talk in 3 or 6 months when maybe more news coming out or more results from your clinic study or licensing deals. Every good news is positive news.
Yep, that sounds great. So interestingly, our investigator is presenting some more information at a conference this weekend. So stay tuned to investors.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon.
You too.